Good evening, everybody. This is Fader's online live lesson number 8. I'm Anthony,
I'm Jordan.
and today we're going to be looking at some material that's related to what we were working on in our last lesson. Just as a quick little review, last lesson we looked at what is known as the note wheel, which is a way that we teach the 12 notes of the chromatic scale here. Basically, there are 12 notes starting from A all the way up to G sharp and A flat. So you've got your natural notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And then in between certain ones, you have these sharps and flats. If you want to go back and look at that in lesson 7, it'll make a lot more sense if you didn't catch that last week. This lesson will make a lot more sense. But anyways, we're going to be looking at scale, at how to make scales out of this. I'm going to leave it off to Jordan to get started into it.
All right, so you've probably heard the term scales thrown around a lot before. We've talked about a couple different scales here before, so like the pentatonic and such like that. Today we're going to be taking a look at the major scale. So this is the most common one that we kind of use and utilize here. And it's a really nice place to start. So you're probably already familiar with it, even if you don't really know it. We talked about it a little bit last week, I believe. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So that whole section of sound is the major scale. So if you kind of sing that to yourself in your head, that's what a major scale should sound like. Now, all major scales are going to follow that exact same pattern. So that's why do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do works for them all, because we can plug in different notes to start our major scale, and then it'll always follow the exact same pattern. And that's what we're going to try to show you guys here today. So, like Anthony was saying, we're gonna relate it back to our note wheel here. And the first thing I want to remind you guys, we talked about this a little bit last time, is the difference between a whole step and a half step. So a half step on our note wheel here is going to be moving one spoke. So an A to an A sharp is a half step, an A sharp to a B is a half step, and a B to a C is a half step. And you might see how that's highlighted here. So that can get a little bit confusing with when we start talking about holds here in a second. But just remember, one spoke on the wheel, that's a half step, and that equates on our guitar to one fret. So if I were to move one fret on my guitar, I was moving half steps at a time there, okay? Now a whole step is going to be two movements on our wheel here, so two spokes. So an A to a B or a B to a C sharp. That would be a whole, not B to C. So that's where that can get a little bit confusing, but B to C and E to F, because we don't have that half note living in between there. That movement's only a half. A whole is going to be two spokes on our wheel. And if I was to move a whole step on my guitar, that's going to be two frets. So 3 to 5, for example. There, I just played a little bit of a major scale there for you. So whole steps, two frets, okay? So we're going to take a look at C major today. It's the easiest to understand. It doesn't include any half notes, as you'll see as we go. It includes half steps, sorry, but not any of these sharps or flats notes. It only uses naturals. So the way pattern for any major scale works is we're starting up here and we're using our circle again and we're going sharp. We got whole. So position 1 and position 2 is a whole step. Whole, whole, half. So 1, 2, 3 is whole, whole, half. And then whole, 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 half. Okay? So no matter what note we plug in there, out of any of these, all 12 of them, it's always the same pattern for the major scale. So like I said, we're going to use C. So let's just plug that in just visually here and see how that would work. So if I started with C right here, that's going to be in the top of my my wheel here. So I'm going to move a whole step away from C. So if I come back down over here, you can see we have it highlighted here. We're going to move two spokes. So D, that's going to be my next note in this major scale. So we're going C, D, okay? Now if I look here, I'm going to move another whole. So I'm going to move D, 1, 2 to E. So C, D, E. Now here you see we're going to be moving a half step. So from E, where we just left off, a half step to F. So I have C, D, E, F. Now I'm going to move another whole. So F goes to G, and then so we have C, D, E, F, G. We're going to move another whole, G to A as a whole, right? 1, 2 to A. And then we're going to move in one more whole. So then it's A, 1, 2 to B for 7. And then a half, you'll notice B, half, brings us back to C. So we went all the way around that circle. We only picked out the notes we wanted for our scale, but by following that pattern, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C. Now you'll notice, like I said a little bit earlier before we started, we didn't have any of these sharps or flats in this one, right? So it's basically just saying our alphabet C, D, I'm going to mess up, C, D, E, F, G, B, A, C, around that way. And we can place any one of those notes in there. So just for the point of this exercise, if I was to put in an A here, I would just follow the exact same idea, move a whole, A, whole to B, then I move a whole, which would be B to C sharp, okay, and so on and so forth as we move along. And that's going to give you the major scale. And do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, all that kind of stuff. And we can find that on our guitar. We can play it in a bunch of different ways, right? We took a look at the note wheel and we kind of applied that to that little board that we made where we plotted out all the different notes on the guitar. So we can actually find those notes and we can play them, and we can play them a whole bunch of different ways. Okay? So if I'm going to play that C major scale now, just so you guys know how it sounds like. Right? So there's one way. I can also do it just on this string alone. Whoops. Right? So it sounded the same. I played the same notes. First time I did it, I used 3 strings. Second time I did it, I just used 1. But I still played C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Back to C, right? And that's where we were talking about last week, our octaves. So the last C I played is an octave higher than the first C I played. Right. Anything you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, just notice that when we were laying this out, that you lay it out in clockwise motion. So when you're applying this whole, half, whole, half, whatever note you pick, you're always moving clockwise. When you're moving, say you're doing an A sharp major, you're moving whole, half, clockwise. That, and one other thing to add to that is whatever note is your first note is the root note. And because this is a major scale, whatever note you put in there, it's that note major. So if we put a C here, it's C major. If we put a G in there, it's G major. And that's the scale. And another thing to note is if you ever see something that says it's in the key of, say C major or G major, it's referring to those notes. So it's in a key that uses only those notes. That's another thing I just wanted to add to that. So,
we get to do this now?
Yes.
Nice.
That was satisfying. So anyways, there's the completed C major scale.
Yep, so you can see now we just plugged in those notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then we'll come to this for a second. But right here, there's that pattern laid out for you. Whole, half, whole, half. And I'm going to kind of say it a few times. I'm really going to reiterate it. That pattern is not going to change no matter which note you're using as your root note, like Anthony said. That pattern is going to stay the same, and you're always just going to follow that, and you can plug in the notes as you go. So if that wheel is a little bit too much drawing or too much going on for you, you can also write it out like this. And you could start with a note here, for example. So C moves a whole, moves a half, and kind of write it out in between there. Sometimes I find that helps as well. Anyways, how does that apply to what we have here? Well, this is kind of like what we had drawn out last week, where we had all of the notes in the chromatic scale drawn out on the board. We did kind of skip out a couple in here, but that's just for the purposes of what we're trying to show you here. You'll notice that we have our 6 strings, big bottom, tiny top, E, A, D, G, B, E. And we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 frets laid out here for you guys. And we just put in all of the notes that are in the C major scale on this board here for you. So a couple things to note before we start. You'll see that we have C here highlighted, and that's because that's our root note, right? That's the scale we're going to be playing. So you'll actually see it occurs a few times just in those first 5 frets alone. Now, typically, when you're starting to play a scale and you're starting to learn it, you're going to want to start with the root note. So you'd probably start here. But again, we wanted to show you where all those different notes would apply. If you eventually, when you're working on like some improvisation stuff and maybe some solo practice, or you're playing with other people, that's where like all of these notes can be played and kind of added in. Not that you can't play them as you're practicing your scale, but when you play a scale and you're just starting to learn it, typically you just want to play it top to bottom and just kind of get used to the sound and the motion of the scale itself. So what we'll do right now is we'll just try playing out this scale right here. So we're just going to look at this first root note, and we're just going to take it to the next root note, just as an exercise, just to practice, okay? So I'm going to ignore these F, G, A, and B to start. So let's just start. And if you have your guitar with you, try to play along with me and Anthony. We're going to play A string, 3rd fret. That's going to be our C note. So we have a C. Okay? So that's where we're starting. That's our root. Now we're going to go to our next note. So that was 3rd fret, 4th, 5th fret of the A string now. That's our D note. So we're going to play that one now. So we went C, D, and again, that's a whole movement. So you can see that's 2 frets on our guitar, right? C, D, I went 3, 5. So C, D, we'll jump down to the next string here. We're going to D, the D string that is, and we're going to go to our 2nd fret for E, and that's another whole movement. So 2nd fret, there's that E note. Now we didn't move 2 frets going up on the guitar, but we still moved a whole, right? And that's where plotting out all those different notes kind of helps you visualize this stuff. So we went 3, 5, 2. Now we're going to go to 3 for that F on the D string. So there's that F. So once again, starting on the A, 3, 5, 2, on the D, 3. And you can probably start to hear it now, right? Do, re, mi, fa. Let's go to the next one. We have a G. And that's going to be on fret 5 of that D string. It's that G. So we went 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. Right? We're almost there. Now we're going to move down to the G string. We have an A note, which is going to be located on the 2nd fret. All right, we'll just keep going here. Now we're going to move over to the 4th fret for our B note. And then we're going to move over to the 5th fret of that G string for our high C, our root note, or our octave. And you'll see that, or you'll hear that it has a nice sound of finale. It just kind of finishes off the scale really nicely. So we'll play that through for you guys one more time. Starting on the A string, 3rd fret, we have 3, 5, D string, 2, 3, 5, G, 2, 4, 5.
Can I do a close up?
I sure can. Yep.
Cool.
Make sure I
Close
have
up coming.
word here.
Good idea.
Sure, I can.
I will just have to. Oops. Microphone.
Sorry about that. All right.
It's a little shaky. Sorry, folks. This will just take a sec. Okay, there we go.
So we had 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5. And notice my finger positions, right? We talked about that earlier in our lessons about kind of trying to lock your fingers into a single position. And that helps you move through those a lot quicker.
Perfect.
There we go.
Yeah, so one thing to note, a couple things actually. So we played C and then D over here. Of course, this D is the exact same as that one. So I mean, in theory, you could play C and then start playing D, E, F, G, A, B, C over here. So you have options when you're playing it. You know, if you're practicing ascending the scale in order, you can start from this C even, you know, and play C, D, E, F, G, A, and of course you have to find B and then C over here somewhere, um, which is not impossible. If you have the full 12 frets that we have from lesson 7, you can look at all the notes on here. We eliminated the sharps and flats because they're not in this scale. For this, made it a little bit easier to see visually, but you can go on a full 12 fret chromatic scale and circle all the notes in a scale and, you know, find where you can play them in different orders and different positions. And one other thing I wanted to note is on the scale wheel here, these numbers are going to be of significance in our next lesson. They're the number, basically the number order of the 7 different notes in the major scale, 1 through 7, and they're going to be crucial in learning how the chords are built. A lot of people go their whole life learning guitar just knowing this is a G chord and this is a D chord, an A minor, a C. But what this really simple follow-up lesson next week is going to do is give you the means to understand, you know, that this G, you know, it's comprised of 3 different notes, and you can actually find it in different spots across here, you know. You know, and so on and so forth. You can find all sorts of different ways to play a chord across the fretboard. So next lesson is going to really unlock how chords really work, the inner workings of them, which is something that I find really interesting. Maybe other people don't. I don't know, but it just gives you a lot more control over what you're playing. If you ever run into a chord you have troubles with, you can find an alternate way to play it. Sort of like how we were trying to figure out an easier way to do D the other day. And I gave that one kind of, you know, pinch trick where you mute the B string, makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, I think we covered pretty well everything. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just one other thing that just to kind of again reiterate that the pattern never changes. The way that I just showed you guys in the close up there to play this scale, that major scale. For example, if I just move it up a half step, now I'm playing a C sharp. I move it up another half step. Right, we can hear that it sounds similar because it's the same motion, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So once you get comfortable with maybe one pattern, you know them all. It's just a matter of plugging it in, figuring out which notes you're using, and simple as that.
Yeah, that's why that root note is really, really key to know. As long as you know where the root is, relatively speaking, wherever you shift it, you know, you move this around. Jordan just did it. Move this up to C sharp, and then everything else moves up a half step. So it really all translates really easily. Yeah.
Perfect.
Do you have any questions?
Haven't had any questions yet. I
Ooh.
think everybody's just digesting all the
Yeah.
information.
There is-
I forgot to upload the worksheet until just now, so it's up now.
Well,
Click on the link.
I forgot to complete it until about 2:30. So That's fair. I'll go over a couple other things. One thing that you can do at home is you can either use a wheel yourself or you can use the line. Is try plugging in a root note and filling out your own. Pick something that we didn't do here. Well, we really only did C. So put like G or F or something at the start and try following it through. When you get to this half, it should bring you back to the root note. If it doesn't, it means that you did something wrong over here. So you have to sort of backtrack so you can find a way to like correct yourself. If you don't end up back at the first note you started off at when you go this last half step, then you got to find your error. So it's kind of a cool way to practice. Like you know that you're very likely doing it right if you end up at the same note. It's a possibility that you could mess up twice and somehow they offset one another and you end up at the same spot. But if you practice that major scale and you get really familiar with the way it sounds, you'll train your ear to sort of spot when you make that wrong note, when you make mistakes in there. So you'll know that you did something wrong that way too. So there are all sorts of fail safes.
Perfect. Right on. Yeah, and like a minor scale and other variations of scales have their own patterns, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is a major scale, so you just once you memorize how that works, then you can move on to the next one and the next one, and it's kind of how music is built.
Yep. And for what it's worth, the pentatonic we were talking about, the prefix penta means 5, so we just take 5 notes out of here, and that's how we make that scale. So when we were playing the E minor pentatonic, this is a little bit ahead of what we were talking about, but E minor scale is the same as a G major scale. It's called relative minor. We'll get into that some other day. But anyways, it's just 5 notes from the G major scale is all we're playing for the E minor pentatonic that we learned a little while ago. So some of them are just variations, and then some of them are different patterns entirely. And yeah, so
Cool. Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, being lesson 8, we went ahead and did the draw for the winner for the guitar, and that person has been contacted, and they know that they've won it. So if that's not you, then sorry, you didn't win. But somebody did, and it's going to be very exciting, and we're going to get all those arrangements made, and we'll be able to post a little bit about that in the near future. So that was the guitar contest, the Fender CD60 that Anthony's been promoting every lesson as we've been going this week. It's been like 2 months or a month and a half.
isn't it just
whatever.
Saturday?
It all just feels like one long Saturday.
All days blend together.
Yeah.
Time has no meaning.
Yeah. And we really appreciate all the people who entered and all the people who've been showing up either way to come to these lessons online, come to them, so to speak.
Yeah.
To sign in and watch. It's been really fun so far. And we've got some more lesson material lined up for you still, so stick around. One final tip I'll give you is mention the minor scale. If you write out a major scale like this, but then make your starting point the 6th note instead, and make 6 your first and second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh notes, etc. Your 6th note is a relative minor to basically. So A minor is all the same notes as C major, except you're starting with an A. So if you were to find an A on here and just play through. Then you're playing a minor scale. So you kind of can get two scales in one. If you think of it that way, you throw a G in there. You'd be G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. So E minor is the relative minor scale to the G major scale. So then you play E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, back to E. That gives you the E minor. So that's just another quick little tip that might be useful if you find you got a good grasp on this and you want to explore it and try different things with it. But again, next week I'm going to show you how to extract all the chords out of here. So if somebody's like, we're playing in the key of C major, you'll know all of the chords that you can play and all of the notes that you can play as well. Because I know that that's something that a lot of sort of like beginners who are well into it, maybe been playing for a year or so, or even some intermediate people. And even honestly, some people who can play advanced stuff but don't really have the experience playing with other people always wonder, how can I jam, sort of freely with other people as opposed to just sticking to like a specific song. Or if I don't know the song and people want to jam over it, like it's in the key of E minor, I play along. This next lesson is going to really, really help you out with that quite a bit. You'll be able to gain the skills to improvise and even create your own music within a key.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to teach it.
Right
I
on.
like that sort of stuff.
Cool. Right on. Well, I think everybody's just saying thanks and stuff like that. So I think we've.
We did it.
Yeah, you did it. No questions. Right on.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and let you.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care.
Have a good one.